So one of the things that somebody did say at the office meeting is that, you know, can we just get back to basics and really go through pendings and really talk about doing them right and doing them completely. And I want to tell you that I came up with an outline that I feel is so complete that when you in October do your business planning, if you could literally take this and ask yourself, do I have a system that makes sure this always happens? Do I have and if you could literally rewrite your customer service business plan using this as an outline on making sure that your business runs efficiently this is customer service, right? Pendings and active listings are customer service. So that I feel this is very complete. It could be a guideline in planning your systems one by one, making sure, yep, I have a system for that. Yep, I have a form for that. Yep, I always do that. Yep, I make sure that happens. Okay, so we're going to go through the outline in the class. So the first item in the outline for running and we're talking about excellence in pendings, right? Number one is a complete file. State law requires that, first of all, you realize when you list a property or sell a property, you are not selling it or listing it. I am with you as the agent. The listing or the pending are with RE/MAX Parrott Associates, with you as the agent. And state law requires that RE/MAX Parrott Associate has a copy of all contracts and pertinent information to the contract. I have the second handout I gave you is from Teresa Tone, and it is a list of all important documents. Is Dave getting the last one, or is there one more after that?
I think they're the last ones.
I
don't know if Emma got hers.
No problem, Emma didn't, so I'm just going to ask Megan to come down and make me more copies. This is a list of all the documents that would make up a complete file. So if you're wondering, do I keep a complete file? This will tell you, do you keep a complete file? The other thing you need to understand is Teresa Tone did put on this document file / can you do me a huge favor? Can you send Megan down to get a document from me and make me some copies? I didn't bring enough handouts down for this class. Thank you. All right, bye. Okay, so she says file / documents needed. When Megan comes down, Dave, would you give her those so she can make copies? Sure. And she'll bring them back? You want me to take them up too? Sure. No, you need to hear the class. She said she'd come down. We have access to your .loop. If you are missing a document, we can access it through .loop. I'm going to tell you that personally, I don't feel like that's good enough. Those documents should be in the file. The paper file should have a copy of all signed contracts and all pertinent information. And I was the queen of complete files. I was excellent at complete files. So you that are walking in, we ran short on handouts, but Becca's making more. But even I, once we started using .loop, it is hard to remember to always have a copy of the document in the file. And even I, the queen of complete files, would once in a while get to the end of the thing and Teresa Tone would be like, I don't have this document. And so I understand that it's difficult to make sure that happens, but I added a thing to my check sheet, are all pertinent documents printed and put in the file, because I'm a check sheet kind of person. So .loop is acceptable, but to me, it's good enough is all documents are in the file. Okay. The other thing to ask yourself, and I was very fortunate that I was in accounting before I was an agent. And when you're working on somebody else's accounts, your employer, I worked for Plant Moran, is meticulous about, if you don't come into work tomorrow, somebody needs to be able to come in, open that file, and be able to take up where you left off. So if we made changes, we made meticulous notes about why we changed something. all the contact information was there. It needed to be so that if I died, another accountant could come in and see exactly what was what, why it was what, and pick up right where I left off. And that's how your files should be. We have had situations where an agent has left or been fired, and now we've got these files. We don't know who the client is. We don't know who the seller is. All we have is an illegible signature on a contract. You know, now there's tax records and we've been able to piece things back together. But if something happened to you, somebody should be able to open that file upstairs in the file drawer and see everything they need to see. Who the client is, how to get a hold of them, has the appraisal been ordered, has it been received, when was all those things. So if you're using a checklist, really a copy of that checklist should be updated in the file, or it should be in Dotloop so that somebody could access your file and complete the transaction if something happened to you. That would be the ultimate test of, are you keeping a complete file? Okay. Moving on, questions, comments? All right. Second item, the contract leads the way. I've said this before. The beautiful thing about a purchase agreement is if you didn't have any checklists, all you've got to do is go back to the purchase agreement and make sure everything in the purchase agreement is happening. The purchase agreement guides the transaction. It lists all the deadlines, right? It tells all the contingencies. It says everything that needs to happen in order to close. So using the purchase agreement as your, and any addendums as your guide, is if you didn't have your own check sheet, or somebody had a check sheet and you didn't quite like it and you wanted to fix it, the way to determine whether or not you're doing a good job in your pendings is, are you following the purchase agreement? How many of you have called me about a question and the first thing I've said is, let me pull up the purchase agreement? You should all be raising your hand. Okay, because I have to say, let me make sure I know what the purchase agreement says, because there's your answer. Okay, so checklists usually are based on the purchase agreement. And here are the things that the purchase agreement tells you. I wonder if Becca knew that was a two-sided document. Can anybody look at the copy you got from Becca? Good, thank you very much. Okay, all terms are outlined in the contract. All deadlines are outlined in the contract. The EMD, the contract says that if the buyer's agent does not collect the EMD within 72 hours, the buyer's agent must notify the listing agent of that, and the seller has a right to terminate the contract. Hey, I have not been able to collect the earnest. The seller gets to say, we're moving on, right? That is in the contract. So your checklist or your follow-up as a buyer's agent should be making sure you notify that agent if you've diligently pursued that earnest and have not been able to collect it. I want to speak briefly about the listing agent. You have a right to confirm that it was received. You do not have a right to a copy of it. That is a check, right, with personal information on it. You do have a right to confirm receipt. Okay, so when someone says to you, well, I need a copy of your earnest agreement or your earnest deposit, no, you don't. Right? I'm confirming that I've received it. Well, I need proof of that. No, you don't, but here's a copy of the receipt. I will acquiesce on that point. The staff puts a receipt in the file and I need a copy of the receipt. I usually make the point of saying, no, you don't, but I will get it to you. Frankly, I'm a licensed broker. I'm not lying to you. If I say we've received it, we received it, but I will give a copy of the receipt. As a listing agent, you have a right to confirm receipt because the contract says if it's not received within 72 hours, your seller gets to terminate. Okay. The EMD must be deposited within 48 hours of receipt. Don't be walking around with EMDs on you. Get them into the office so that we can get them deposited. Especially on cash sales, your client writes a personal check for the EMD and then they want to close in less than 10 days. We haven't even had a chance to make sure that EMD clears. So again, very important that you understand that, yes, we received the EMD, but if that check were to bounce and we closed, assuming we had the EMD, we are out that money. So again, time is of the essence. Those deadlines are very clearly outlined in the contract. It's your job to make sure those deadlines happen. Inspections, Cassiana.
Sorry, I thought EMD was 2 business days. I didn't realize it was 48 hours. So what about an EMD received after hours on Friday?
Hold on. When I said that, I thought, I'm gonna have to read the contract again. Hold on, templates.
Does the contract even specify when it will be deposited?
Oh, that's state law.
law.
Okay, thank you. And I have a copy of that law and I will disseminate it. Copy of Ernest law. I will answer that question. I feel like it's 48 hours,
I'm fairly certain she's correct. It's business days.
2 business days, and that's why I'm thinking 48 hours,
But the
okay?
contract does specify hours. The contract specifies.
It's
it will
72
be
hours.
collected within 72 hours.
Absolutely.
But for you to deposit it, I'm pretty sure it's 48.
It's 2 business
Or-
days,
yeah.
which would make sense because your office doesn't have staff available to deposit it on Sunday if you collected it Friday. So, but I will confirm that. Let's see, inspections.
Sorry,
Yes,
one other
no,
thing on
please.
that, about the 10 days, to clear before closing, if we, if we have a cash transaction, should we be checking, has the check cleared yet? Is that part
We-
of our closing?
Staff actually checks that. If
Okay.
you're trying to close quickly on something and we haven't had the deposit very long, it doesn't necessarily take 10 days to clear.
Okay,
It could take 10 days to clear. We check and make sure it is cleared,
okay.
right?
got it.
Okay,
That's-
which often happens in 5 days. Just understand that you can't hand us a personal check for an earnest and then expect us to close without making sure that that personal check is, we've actually one time had it so short that we just called the other bank and confirmed that the funds were available and that they'd received the draw, right? And they confirmed, and I mean, it is not my job to make things hard for you guys, but I also have a duty to make sure these things are covered. So it's something to be aware of.
It is within 2 banking days.
Thank you very much. 2 banking days. Inspections, check your boxes, right? God, I hate blank boxes on a purchase agreement. Now, sometimes they are blank. Once you choose mortgage, you don't choose equity and et cetera, et cetera. But, right, leave the stuff people leave blank. It drives me insane. It's just so sloppy and lazy. It's our, sorry, it's our responsibility to take care of our buyers and sellers and make sure the contract is complete. So check your boxes. What does 10 days mean? Now, I understand, please remember, it's not necessarily 10 days anymore. It's the number of days you state and mark seller, buyer, right? Okay, but let's say it says buyer has 10 days. What does 10 days mean? Yeah, from the effective date, what is the effective date of the contract? When there's a meeting of the minds, right? I would argue that last seller saw that the buyer's blah, blah, blah is necessary for the lender. And frankly, the only reason it's necessary for the lender is because it's on the contract. Lenders don't like blank signature lines. But if the buyer counters and the seller accepts the counter, you have a meeting of the minds, right? Buyer acknowledging that the seller accepted their counter. I don't think that you'd get away with that being the next day and saying that's the effective date. The effective date was the date you had a meeting of the minds, the date that it was accepted, right? Okay. And then 10 days after that. And is it 10 days to get the inspection? No. It's 10 days to complete it and ask for repairs or concessions if wanted within that 10 days. What do you do if the inspection's not till the 10th day?
Ask for an extension.
Ask for an extension in writing and get it accepted, right? Okay, all right. Sorry. Check your boxes. What does 10 day? Don't forget, VA requires that the seller pay for the pest inspection. Okay. All to-dos are outlined in the contract. Addendums change everything. And what I mean by that is when there's an addendum, it changes something for the lender, it changes something for the title company, it changes something for the contract. So when you get an addendum signed, make sure all the people that need to know. How many times have you gotten to a closing and the price has changed and the title company didn't know that the price had changed because you forgot to notify the title company that there'd been a price change and now the title work needs to be revised, right? Okay. I understand there are times the lender doesn't need to see an addendum. We're going to talk about that too. You have to be careful. There's a difference between lender told you they don't want to see it and fraud. We don't commit fraud, right? We don't hide things from the lender that the parties then have to sign at closing. There's nothing the lender doesn't know about and they're committing fraud. Okay, there's things the lender doesn't want to know about and we understand that. We're going to talk about that. Get everything in writing, get everything in writing. And we know this, but we don't. And here, and again, I struggled with this sometimes. To me, the number one, even if you're perfect about getting everything in writing, the number one slip up is you call an agent, you want to show their listing. And they say, okay, just want to let you know there's no carpet in the living room, but the seller has ordered carpet, it's going in. Okay, show the house. Buyer loves it, buyer writes an offer, and the listing agent says to the seller, well, it looks like you don't have to put carpet in, they didn't ask for it. Which is what I'd say as a listing agent. I'd say to myself, it looks like we don't have to put carpet in. Now I'd warn the seller, this is gonna come back and bite us, the buyer screwed up, they didn't ask for carpet, technically you don't have to put it in, but don't take anyone's word for anything, right? You write that down, and if they write an offer, you say, seller shall install carpeting in the living room. Sale is contingent upon buyer's acceptance of the color, right? Okay. Okay. Other examples of where we forget to follow up with written addendums. I know another one. Home inspection. You call the other agent, you're like, I'm pretty sure we're going to be writing a repair addendum. Why? What's up? Well, there was a leak in a faucet. There was this, there was that. But I'm waiting to hear what the buyer wants to do. Agent calls you back the next morning. They're just going to fix that leak. Great, I'll get you an addendum, right? Seller shall fix leak. You don't take their word for it. Anything that other agent promises you, you get in writing. Okay, have I beat that horse hard enough? Good. What are the contingencies of the sale, right? Title work. I just taught a very in-depth class on title work. But one of the biggest things we talked about in title work is if we're not careful, especially new agents, the title reps are so helpful that you start to forget whose job it is to clear a title defect. That title company did not put that defect on there, and it's not their job to remove it. It's the seller's job. We didn't get a quitclaim deed that's no good. You did. You go get a better quitclaim deed. It is not, yes, the title company can tell you we need this. It's not their job to go get it. It is your seller's job to fix title problems. But your seller can't fix title problems if you don't read the title work. Okay. And I'm not going to teach another title class, but lender approval, right? How often do you call the lender? Dave, how often do you call the lender?
Usually once a week.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. Like that can't be true.
When Tamara tells me I have to.
Once a week or less, maybe. But honestly, depends on if I'm working for the buyer and stuff.
Sure. Actually, when I sold it didn't depend, but not all my listing agents loved me when I was the buyer, or buyer's agent loved me when I was a listing agent calling the lender every week, but I did. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what.
Yeah.
Like not
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah. Don't know.
Every day.
Every day right now. Every day. Yeah. Okay. Right. It's an update. Hey, Do you need anything, right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. At the beginning of the transaction, you say to the buyer, unless it's a lender you know, right? So lender you know, you work along with, great. If it's a lender you haven't worked with, at the beginning of the transaction, you say to the buyer, listen, I need something from you. I need to work closely with your lender. I need to be kept in the loop because I can help get things done. I need you to call your lender and give them permission expressly, not just permission, but tell them you want them to tell me what's going on, right? Because the last thing you need is the lender stonewalling you because it's, okay. All right. And then you and the lender are like this. I was just talking to Brian Maloney the other day, right? How can we do things better, right? And I had a client, Bill Roos. Bill's a typical construction worker. Why do they need that? Well, why do they need that? Well, why do they need that? Well, I don't keep it there. They don't need that. And I'm the only person that said, Bill, shut up. Who cares if they want it? Do you want the loan? Get it to them. The lender can't say that. They don't have that relationship with the client. The lender says to me, I still need proof of Bill, shut up and get them the letter. I'll write it. You sign it, right? That's what we can do. But we need to make sure all parties understand we're a team here. So you tell your buyer to tell the lender, tell her what you need. She understands better anyway. Okay. Lender approval, appraisal review. When do we know the appraisal is good?
After the official notice of value.
Right. After the underwriter has reviewed it. The lender calls you and says, appraisal came in, everything looks good. Has it been to underwriting? Because there are times when the appraisal comes in, everything looks good, and then underwriting flags something. They don't like one of the comps. They don't, whatever. So it doesn't just need to come back. It needs to go through underwriting. Another spot where we screw up on addendums, right? Appraisal comes in, it's FHA, some repairs need to be done. Who has to do those repairs? Right, nobody has to do those repairs. It could kill the deal unless the contract says buyer shall pay all FHA or lender required repairs not to exceed $2,000, and then you get quotes, and as long as it's under $2,000, and unless it's been negotiated up front, it cracks me up how realtors will just start talking back and forth about the appraisal. Well, they need this now. All right, well, if your people will paint, go ahead and talk, but then an addendum needs to be written. Seller shall scrape and paint garage and who's paying for the re-inspect, right? All that needs to be negotiated and in writing. The only time it doesn't need to be in writing is if it's done, right? Agent calls you and says, actually, they saw the report themselves, or the appraiser was there when they were there and the appraiser pointed that out and they had Katz come and fix it. And here's the paid receipt to Katz. And you know what I mean? And everything is done and you're confident that it's done, right? And the appraiser comes back and re-inspects and confirms that it's done, then it's done, right? But other than that, if there's an agreement that it will be done, it has to be in writing.
Do you still need the additional writing if in your purchase agreement you have that the seller will make up to $500 of lending required repairs? Do you still need to have that specified that the seller will do A, B, C, and D?
I would,
original.
I would, because you prove to me it's $500, right? So seller shall, following repairs need to be done. See attached bid, which is under $500 per the purchase agreement, seller will pay for these repairs, right? I don't, what the seller may not sign it and could literally refuse to sign it because they're already contracted to do it. But for me, I'm still,
why they wouldn't.
I
I haven't been in that position. I'm just
Yeah.
now at this point, like sort of feel like that would fall on the seller to get the bids and prove more that the required that the repairs were more than the $500.
Well, and what you're speaking to is my control freakishness, which if it needs to be done, I'm gonna do it.
Well,
Yeah.
because otherwise, that's,
Yeah, right.
I,
So I'm getting the bids because they
I-
need to be gotten and I do everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yes, I don't know. That's the other thing, right? It's no one's job to get the bids, except for the bids have to be gotten. So,
Or the seller does the work themselves.
Right.
There isn't anything that says that the seller
Oh.
can't scrape and paint. but-
thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me, right? Seller doing the work themselves. We've talked about this before. If you allow the seller to dictate the repairs, then you get what you get. So, you know, sellers paint sloppy. Seller has his dad fix the furnace. You know, if the repair is important and it's important how the repair needs to be done, then if you're really going to protect the buyer, you're going to say seller shall pay for replacement of furnace per attached quote from Hodgson Heating. And you dictate who's going to do it and what they're going to do and a licensed contractor so that the buyer knows what they're getting. How many times have you allowed the seller to do a repair, you close, and then the buyer's unhappy with the quality of the repair?
Well, that's why I always recommend buyers take care of it yourself.
Yeah,
You-
right.
You want to have control of this and you want to say who's doing it.
Then
and
get
you
a
wanna
price
put the
reduction
closing
or
in,
get a
yep,
credit for closing costs and
take care of
fix it yourself. Amen. If you're going to have the seller fix something, you better be very, very clear about what that fix is going to look like. Otherwise, the buyer gets what they get. Okay. Going even farther, what marketing should be done during a pending, right? Does your checklist remind you about the marketing that you should be doing? Are you doing a just sold postcard? Are you door knocking to the neighbors and saying, hi, I'm Lisa from Remax. I just sold the house, the Smith's house 2 doors down. Just thought you might be interested to hear that it sold in 5 days and wondered if you had any questions. If that's in your plan, then it should be part of your pending checklist, right? Are you posting on social media, just listed, just sold, congratulations to my clients, etc.? And if that's part of your plan, then is it getting done consistently? What are your marketing efforts during a pending? Are you maintaining your database? Right? Are you updating? Are you putting the client in your database? Are you updating their status in your database? Are you updating the action plan that goes along with them in your database? Are you doing post-closing follow-up? What is your post-closing follow-up? Right? Is it an anniversary card in a year and a 60-day call? Hey, it's been 60 days. Just want to make sure there's no questions. Hope you guys are, if there is it part of that to-do list and are you consistently doing it? Is there client recognition? Are there closing gifts? And if they are, then part of a good pending is that being part of what you do and it getting done consistently. Okay, how does it get done consistently? You have a method, right? And the method is what? Who feels that every client they have gets the same experience for every pending? Good for you. How do you think that happens? Why do they get the same experience?
And then have a pretty thorough checklist.
And is it paper or is it on the computer?
Both.
Okay. Okay. All
'Cause I
right.
have it also in the file too, in case something happens to me, then anybody can access it, but I have it on my computer too.
Who heard me say they all get the same experience and thought, right? The reason they don't get the same experience is if you're flying by the seat of your pants. And one day I'm busy and they get this much and the next day I'm not busy and or one transaction, I was in the middle of vacation, surgery, what's another thing? Babysitting grandkids. But the next transaction, I really wasn't that busy. And this transaction went very differently than this one, which just got sorry, I haven't done that, but I'll get it done. Sorry, right? The way it gets done consistently is no matter what's going on in your world, there's a check sheet. I did this. I did this. I did this. And that check sheet can be many things. There are enough samples of paper checklists in this office that if you don't have one you like, you haven't looked hard enough, or take one you almost like and make it your own. There is a checklist in dotloop that I created a task list, and all you have to do is upload that task list. Now, the one in Dotloop is the basics. It is just the kind of, these are the things everybody has to do. It's not marketing. It's not all the things you might do, but
I'll add some things to that.
you can
Like,
add to
like,
it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll need to do that. And I just.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talia has a checklist that has been put into Dotloop that you can use. She asked that it be made Dotloop ready, and as long as I'm going to do it for her, you know, Talia, she's happy to share her forms. So it's not a task list in Dotloop. It's a document that you can put in your loop that you can track. The upside of using an online task list is
So it's available.
you're mobile, right? You can check it from anywhere. Some people prefer paper. I always did, and that's fine. But that's how you give consistently superior service is here's all the things I do, and then I do them for everyone. Done. Ready to close. What are your responsibilities? Right? Remote signing. Does everybody know what thoughts should trigger in your head the minute you realize somebody needs to sign remotely? Now, not your case. It's very different. Not when they're on a ship in Japan. Yeah. No. But other than that, does everybody know what should trigger automatically?
Where are you?
Where are you?
How many times?
How do we contact you?
Do you need translated?
Do you need translating? The title company. They set up the remote closer. You can't call the title company and say, we're all set to close Friday, and oh, by the way, one of them's remote. The minute you know you may have a remote signer, you let the title company know, and all they need to know is the person's contact information, because they'll contact your client. They'll set up the remote notary. They'll know if somebody has to close the day before so that stuff can be overnighted and be there on the day of closing. But the sooner you do that, the better. The biggest thing is notify the title company that you've got a remote closer. Okay. Scheduling, right? You find out you have a clear to close. Who all needs to know? So you're gonna, what's the first call?
So usually the client to find out what their availability is.
Okay, so
And
you
then-
call the client and
and
find
then
out what their availability is.
Usually title after to make sure that title has that spot open.
Okay, so now title, and so if everything's worked out great, your client has said we could do Thursday afternoon, we could get out at 1 anytime after 1. You call the title company, they do have a 3 o'clock available, then what?
Upstairs
The
to,
second party.
You call the other agent,
The other agent.
see when their client can close and can they close at 3 o'clock. Now, used to be closings only happened at the same time. That used to be, that was
Never happened
unheard
at the
of.
same time.
Now it's not that big a deal if the other party can't close at 3, but then they're on their own. Close when you can close. We're closing at 3. But if you can, it's nice to have everybody close at once. Documents, keys, checks all go out at once, but it is certainly not imperative. Okay, so you've got title and the 2 sides online. Now who?
Girls upstairs.
The girls upstairs. How on earth can they give you your check if they don't even know you're closing? How can they have your file ready and make sure all your documents are in there if they don't know you're closing? How can they make sure broker statements are ready if they don't know you have a closing? So yes, tell the girls upstairs, we're missing someone.
Lender.
The lender. They've given you a clear to close, but you've got to call them back and let them know when you're closing, right? Okay, so all those people need to be scheduled. Closing instructions. Somebody tell me what closing instructions are.
Admin fee, commission, any other bills that need to be paid outside of, or out of on the closing statement, any repairs that were done, anything like that.
That's what goes on the closing instructions. What are closing instructions?
a detailed list of who gets paid what.
For
and
whom?
Title.
Title.
Title. Because remember, lender sends a package to the title company with all their fees. Your package, so to speak, is your closing instructions. You forget that the seller has to pay for a home warranty and it doesn't get paid at closing and your buyer now doesn't have the home warranty that was promised to them, what are your options?
Pay it yourself.
That is, right? That's not the only option, but that's where we end up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Because the seller says tough luck, or the seller frankly leaves the closing and drives to Tennessee and never returns their agent's calls again. Okay, and that home warranty is on you. That was your, that was, yeah, that was you. That actually happened, yeah. Okay, so closing you get the clear to close, you schedule the closing, you fill out a complete sheet, it exists in Dotloop, closing instructions, and how do you make sure you don't forget anything?
Well, I've done it for like the close. Wait, just to make sure I understand your question. How do I make sure I don't forget what goes on my clothing? I'll often do it in real time. Like if I'm like, oh, this has got to get paid, and da-da-da, I just automatically add it onto my closing instructions. It's on my notes, and then I always review.
And what I used to do is I'd go to the office, pull out the file, and literally go through the file, document by, oh, survey. I forgot, we still have to pay for that survey. File, document by document. Go into Dotloop, make sure I'm not missing any documents, right? Okay, and make sure, again, the easy way to fill out the closing sheet is the purchase agreement tells you what needs to be done and all addendums. Okay, if you forget something, that's on you. And the title company doesn't know all this. And when you send those closings instructions, what if I said to the title company, I paid for the well and septic, you need to pay me back? You need proof.
Yeah.
They're not just going to give you money from the seller because you say they have to pay me back. So any invoices you're asking the title company to cover, they need a copy of it. If it's in the addendum where the seller agreed to it, the title company needs a copy of that. They need proof that these are actually amounts to be paid. So it's the closing instructions along with all of the proof. Okay, go
I
ahead.
noticed on the closing instructions, it doesn't have client number and email, and I know that's in other places, but should we put that in the instructions somehow, anyhow?
Me personally, no, and because title companies, they're wonderful. They're helping. They're also sick and tired of agents that don't do their job. So if they can get their hands on my client's information, they're just going to skip me and go straight to the client. And I kind of can't blame them, but that's not happening to me. I don't want the title company having direct access to my clients unless I want them to have direct access. So for me, no, but
And then what about like the whole social security number? I know people are
No,
kind of finicky
we
about
don't have to
that.
do any of that
Oh,
anymore. Yeah,
okay.
it shouldn't still be on there. It's an older form. Do not worry about social.
Okay.
Please
don't
don't
need
collect
to
social
post it
security
all?
numbers.
Not even the last 6? For their payoff?
For their payoff. She's talking, no, on the closing instructions, it literally says seller's name, da, 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 da. Yeah, honestly, seller's name is all I really put. And that's, I mean, you've already got title work. If there's a problem with the seller's name or the buyer's name at this point, you've done something wrong because that's all on the title work anyway. What you're doing is confirming with them that they've got the right seller and the right buyer, that it's matching. Okay, which brings us to numbers. I don't want to call you out, so I'm not going to ask, can everybody do this? And Emma can't because she hasn't had to yet. And Tamara may not. I don't know if we should all be able to go through a closing disclosure and tell somebody what every single number is. Just because the title rep does that doesn't mean you don't have to know it. You should be able to say, on one side is all the numbers you're being charged, and on the other side are all the credits. This is your loan origination fee. This is what the lender charges you to do the loan. This is what they charged you for the appraisal, but you paid that up front. This is this, this is this, this is this. You should know those numbers. If you don't know those numbers, come to me, train on them 2 or 3 times. You should know those numbers. When the numbers come to you, you don't look them over and go, looks good. First of all, if it's your seller, you pull up the net sheet you gave them when they accepted the offer, and you make sure that they're pretty close bottom lines, because our net sheets should be, unless there was a huge addendum or something, it should pretty much match the net sheet. And you gave them a net sheet. You kind of owe it to them to make sure it kind of matches the net sheet, right? And then you pull up the closing instructions that you sent to the title company and you make sure all the numbers you told them to put on there are on there. We don't just look at the numbers and say, it looks good. We check, we're responsible for checking those numbers and making sure it has on it what it's supposed to have on it to the best of our knowledge. We don't know what the lender charges for a loan origination fee. We don't know if the lender gave them credits. If you see a lender credit, you should be able to explain to the buyer what that is. It's not your job to verify it, but any number we're responsible for verifying. Okay. Checking numbers, walkthrough. Don't leave it blank about a walkthrough. And then if you asked for a walkthrough, it's not the buyer's job to say, what about our walkthrough? Right? If you asked on the contract for a walkthrough, then it's your job to say to the buyer, we asked for a walkthrough. So let's go ahead and schedule, we're closing at 10. Let's meet at 9 at the house to do your final walkthrough. Okay. Don't miss the walkthrough. That's your fault if that walkthrough doesn't happen. It's not the buyer's job. It's your job to make sure that happens. What the client needs to bring, right? They need to prove they are who they are. They need to bring ID. That's kind of on you if your buyer shows up or your seller shows up with no ID. That's easy to tell them, make sure you bring ID with you. Seller needs to bring the keys. That's your job to remind your seller to bring the keys and or all garage door openers, or bring a key and leave the rest of them in a drawer, whatever. Social security numbers or EINs for trusts, estates, etc. Everybody needs a social security number. There are forms they have to fill out at the closing with social security number on them. Most people know their social security number by heart and don't have to prove it. But people who are what for trusts, who are executors for a trust or trustees or whatever, signing for a trust or an estate, usually that trust or estate has a tax ID number. It's either that person's social security number or it's an actual federal tax ID number, and that needs to be at the closing. They need to have that. They need to know that at the closing. Buyer needs certified funds and enough time to get them. That's the other thing. Don't have a closing at 10 o'clock in the morning and get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon and be like, I don't have numbers. That's your job, right? You put it on when I would schedule a closing Friday at 3 o'clock, I'd put a note on my calendar Thursday at 1 o'clock, check and make sure numbers are in. And if I didn't see them by 1 o'clock, when that reminder came, I called Katie. Hey, Katie, have you gotten a package from the lender yet? Yes, Lisa, we have it. I'm working on the numbers. I should have them by 3. Great. Then I'm going to put a reminder at 3 that if I don't have those numbers, hey, Katie, do you have those numbers yet? Yep, I'm about to send them to you, right? If I call Katie at 1 o'clock and no, they don't have the package from the lender yet, then I'm calling the lender. Hey, we have a closing tomorrow and title company doesn't even have the packet yet. Oh, let me check on that. Yeah, you better, right? Right? It's not your job to get the lender package too, but you shouldn't be sitting there going, I still have numbers. You should be checking on numbers. Where's my numbers? Where's my numbers? Where's my numbers? Because your buyer's got to get to the bank to get a certified check. They got to have time to do that. They've got to agree with the numbers. Your seller has to agree with the numbers. Dad always said, work today with that closing table in mind. And what he meant was, don't get to the closing table and be like, right? I'm thinking of everything that could go wrong at that closing table, and I'm making sure well, one of the things that could go wrong is they don't get numbers till last minute and they don't like them. Okay. Disbursements. Oh, I'm like, why did I put disbursements? Checks need to be made out to deed holders. So when that really becomes important is if it's an estate, right? So the property is in the estate of Agnes B. Smith, and Agnes is deceased, and there's 3 kids and they get the money. They don't get the money. The check's made out to the estate of Agnes B. Smith. There better be a bank account somewhere that's the estate of Agnes B. Smith, or you've got a check made out to nobody that can't be cashed, can't be deposited. Kids get nothing. So kids, of course, assume that they're going to get to closing and there's going to be 3 equal checks. That's not the case. The check is made out to the deed holder. So the deed holder, the Damron Family Trust, every time I say this, I realize I do not have a bank account called the Damron Family Trust. And yet I have a Damron Family Trust. I have got to open a bank account, even if I just put 10 bucks in it. Called it because if Freddie and I died, now Morgan could open one. She's our executor and she could do it, but there has to be a bank account in the name of the deed holder for the check to go to. If it's a divorce, right? Sometimes 2 checks are cut, but there has to be a judgment saying this much to this person, this, that they can't just be like, here's your 50%. The divorce judgment may not be 50-50. So there has to be proof of how those checks are going to be cut. So maybe for a new agent, frankly, even for an experienced agent, I've gone through this training today and thought there should have been other things on my checklist, and my checklist was overkill. But there should have been a thing of who do checks get cut to? Because it's not a problem 90% of the time, but when it's a problem, it's a problem. And I should have had that. And most of the time I would have been like owner. But every once in a while I would have been like, oh, good point. Who does the check get cut to? Because when it's a problem, it's a problem. Buyer needs to certify disbursements, keys, right? Seller needs to know, bring keys, bring all garage door openers. Like, oh, we gave my brother one of the, great. Now some stranger can open my garage door. Thank you very much, right? Those are discussions that it's our job to have with the seller. Make sure you have all your keys. Now, what is the discussion with the buyer? Change the locks, right? Change the locks and recode your garage door opener, especially if there's a, right? But also you have a conversation with the seller. You have to give them all the keys. You don't get to keep any. Utilities, right? What's the big snafu with utilities? Okay, right? City of
Buyers
Bed.
forget to do it.
One is buyers forget to do it and seller finds out 2 months later they're still paying utilities. What's the other one the seller does? Shuts them off.
Yeah.
To my nephew in the middle of winter. My nephew bought a house on Friday, gets to the closing and finds out the seller shut off the utilities. And it's a Friday afternoon and my nephew had middle of winter, no utilities on over the weekend of his new home. Because the agent didn't tell him, don't shut them off. Call and tell them you want them transferred into the new buyer's name, and then tell your seller, check in a few days and make sure they did. What the seller should do is say, they should be transferred by this date, but by this date, I want them shut off if they're not transferred, right? At some point, you have to shut them off if the buyer hasn't transferred them. But again, check on those things,
Yeah, I
right?
once had a buyer who went a week without electricity because they thought they had just lost power. Because they called Semco and put the utilities in their name, even though I gave them a nice list. And it only just so happened, I happened to be at Meyer at the same time they were buying candles. Guys. like,
It's
you don't have
consumers.
electricity because you didn't call consumers. And, yeah, and I had like, I knew that they had to call consumers. Like I went, like, because the seller kept coming to, the seller's agent kept coming to me and saying, hey, they still haven't transferred electricity. So I went to their house. I put notes in their mailbox.
And they're like, we did. It's like, you did it.
When they came to Michigan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys didn't. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm like, tell the
It's
seller
like-
just to cancel it because the seller kept it in his name.
Yes.
For 2 whole months. And
Wow.
I'm
Well,
like,
and
"Tell them to
frankly,
cancel it.
guys-
I
Yeah.
can't make them do it, and they're not, I can't get in touch with them, they're not calling me back.
But
And
this
like,
goes back to marketing now, not in your case, you
no,
tried.
I
But
did,
this goes back to marketing too, right? A little bit of this a lot of this transaction is getting it closed for them. But a little bit of it is, you're welcome. Didn't I do a great job? I love you. Don't you love me? And having a nice sheet of paper that's branded to you that says, here are the utilities and I've asked the seller and here's who you have for gas, here's who you have. That is an extra service, right? That is something more that you can do with them, branded to you. You tried calling them-
They got a
call-
phone number, yeah.
calling them 3 days later and saying, just want to make sure everything's all set. Utilities good, everything good. That's just your opportunity, right? To market as well as do a great job. How do we get repeat and referral? There's 2 ways. The first is doing a great job. The second is asking for repeat referrals, but the first is doing a great job. Okay, those are extra ways of going. I used to send out at pending, one for sellers and one for buyers. Congratulations, you're now pending. Here's the address. Here are the things that have to be done before we close. Don't worry, this is all on me, but put this up on your refrigerator and you can follow along, right? So their friend walks in, they've got this cool list of, appraisal, inspection, and their friend says, oh, my realtor didn't give me that. So yes, I'm delivering great service, but it's a marketing effort as well. Okay, all right. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel comfortable sharing with the group on a scale of 1 to 10, looking at this list, how perfect are your pendings consistently? Do you feel comfortable sharing? No judgment. Casey's giving herself a 7.
Mine are usually pretty good, but I'm not great about getting the papers in the files. They're always in dot loop. If it's not in dot loop, then it's in the file 100% of the time. But I'm not great about coming to the office and printing out this and putting it in the file.
So for what it's worth,
That does not always happen.
I'm even okay with you emailing Becca and saying, could you print this file in dot
Clicking
loop
that
and
extra
put it in the
button and
file?
Hitting share.
Yes.
And sending it to them.
Yes.
I tend to forget, like, oh, I got this addendum from the buyers and the sellers just signed it and I just sent it over to the seller's admin, but I forgot to include
So
our admin in that. you know,
Lacey and I
forget.
were just working on pending check sheets, and the one she loved, I was looking at it and I felt like it was a little bit of overkill, and I was talking about it, and she said, well, one thing I love about this is for every document, it says, does the lender have it? Does the title company have it? Does staff have it? And I was like, I love that. I love that it says, did you give this to all these people? So that part I did love. So some of you, like, that would just be redundant to have that on your checklist. If you're great at something, I don't need to have a checklist to brush my teeth. I do it every day. But if you know that's something you slip on, you could just add it to your checklist. What were you going to say?
Is it appropriate to add like Teresa, Tony, and Rebecca straight to our loop? So for example, when we do get those things, we
Yeah,
can
it's
send it
called
just
admin.
directly.
Adam is an
Yeah, Remax
admin.
And they're,
Mhm.
they're assigned
Well-
to your file almost automatically. or at least
So then-
Mine are.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure, so they automatically can see it, so.
They
is
can,
it
if they
redundant if I share it to them, or? is it
No,
helpful?
because if they need to go in and see if you have something, they have access
They
to
can
all
do
your
that,
loops.
okay.
But sharing something with them says, could you please put this in the file for me?
Okay.
Don't share it if you've already put it in the file. Please don't share every document with them unless it's to say, could you print this and put it in the file for me? Right. Okay.
'Cause that lets them know immediately that this happened, as opposed to them getting the file ready for closing and then realize, oh, this isn't here, or they
That's-
wouldn't know
Yeah.
to check for. the
Plus it's
addendum,
extra
you
work.
know.
I mean, it's just
Mhm.
extra work. Why should they have to scour your .loop account and make sure you've
Mhm.
put every,
Mhm.
I mean, it's a lot of extra work.
Mm-hmm.
1 to 10,
Probably a 7 or 8.
7 or 8,
6, 7.
6, 7. I'm 0, but who knows, right?
She's
0,
got
10, who knows, right? She's been, yeah, who knows?
No, I like to think I do a very, very good job of making sure everything is in the file that needs to be in the file.
Mhm.
And even for things like that, I also keep copies of everything, not only in .loop, but also on my computer, so I can email those to anyone from anywhere.
Can't
I'm-
we all admit though, that if you picture in your head what I'm saying is, what if every single transaction had every single thing done on time, well done, the same, don't you think of that and think that'd be awesome, right? That is the goal to strive for. And the way to achieve that is systems, because you cannot achieve consistency in your life. My God, I am worn out these last few weeks because of grandchildren things. I mean, I have a house with a pool. I want people over. It's busy in the summer. There's no way I'm going to create consistency in my life. So I have to create consistency in my systems so that they happen consistently while my life goes, you know, alone, not alone, alone, not alone. So, you know, you're not going to create consistency in the life. So create consistency in the systems. And then your clients, I think there's no excuse ever, this is me personally, ever to tell a client, I'm sorry, I've just been so busy and fuck
No.
you.
That would never come
Sorry.
from my mouth.
Don't.
No.
I mean, it is
Even if it's true, don't
and
tell.
now,
No, right.
now,
exactly.
do we need to set boundaries in our life? Do we need to let our clients understand there are business hours and, you know, do we have every right to act as professionals and set boundaries?
I'm awful.
Absolutely.
I'm awful at that too. You call me 11 o'clock, I'm answering.
Well, if that's
I'm
your
bad at
choice,
that.
if
I'm
that's
bad
your,
at that. I
if-
would. I
if-
would lose sleep if that, when client called me and left me a voicemail, even if they said, hey, I know it's late, I just didn't want to forget about this, call me back tomorrow.
And-
Sorry, you're not even gonna have to leave me the voicemail because I'm gonna answer when it rings. But even if you did and I listened to it, I'm still calling.
And
back.
Ashley, if
Because it
that's
stressed
the
me out.
choice you've made as a professional, I would rather, then fine.
Yeah.
But if you're struggling with, oh my God, these people, that's on you, right? You have every right. Your accountant would not take your call at 11:30 at night. Your doctor wouldn't, your lawyer wouldn't, the state of Michigan wouldn't, you know, many people that you rely on would not take your call at 11:30 at night, and you don't hate them and you don't blame them and you don't think they're crazy, right? Okay, so you have every right to set professional boundaries in your life. What I think is unacceptable is to apologize for a mistake because your life is crazy. You just don't, if you made a mistake, it's because you did it, you know, you should have systems in place that make your job happen no matter what your life is doing.
Can I add something?
Yes, and then I want to say one more thing. Go ahead.
When she's talking about being a former closer, talking about the title company and closing and getting them your bills, your closing check sheet, the payoff, all that stuff. It is so important. And if you don't understand something on title, I would ask them. And then about the consistency part, when I did a closing, I always did it the same way every single time. My documents were the same way. That way I knew if I was missing something, it triggered. It helps a lot.
Those of you who have children can relate to this with your kids. If not, you were a kid. I remember saying to my son, Josh, you've spent more time avoiding this chore than it would have taken you to do it. Right? Systems don't chain you down. Systems free you up. That's what I just, you know, this moment the other day, because I was kind of excusing my agents who are wheeler dealers and not systems people. Well, you know, some people can't be chained down. Some people have to be. That's baloney. That's baloney. If you are not really a system-y person and you're thinking, well, I like to shoot from the hip. I'm not. That's baloney. Systems free you up to be that way. If your systems are in line, you can be like, hey, who do you know? What do you got? What do you know? You're a chicken with your head cut off no matter who you are. If your systems aren't in place, systems don't tie you down. They free you up.